We can talk about system access permission. Now, this is the prerogative to be able to act on the computer resource with regards as to how you want to assign access permissions. We usually would call this a technical privilege. The reason it's called a technical privilege is because you're using technology to be able to protect this asset, like passwords and those types of things. Now, the access information resources should be established, managed, and controlled at a physical and a logical level. And suddenly it's like, oh, wait a minute, you just got through saying technical. Now you're saying physical and logical. And yeah, we're looking at the term of controls in many different ways. Physically, there's no password. But if I can touch, let's say if it's system access, if I can touch that server, I own your data. And people say, well, no, you don't, because I still have a password on there. And I'm saying, oh, yeah? I'm just going to open up the case. I'm going to pull out the hard drive. I own your data. I'll take it back, copy it, clone it, put it back in, hope that you never noticed the outage while it was down. I own the information. If I can touch it, I own it. So that's the physical part. Obviously, the technical part was the maybe like a remote access, needing passwords and other security. So we need to at least make sure that, like we said, that we are establishing, managing, and controlling the types of access that we have. Now, some of the examples of physical access, as I've already said, could be the entry into a building, a suite, into the data center, or other room. Making sure we have the use of badges or memory cards, guard keys, to have real walls, call them true walls. Now, what that means is that in a lot of office space, the walls you see go up to the fake ceiling, the little panels that hang down. And really, it doesn't take much for me to be able to pop up one of those ceiling panels and climb over that little wall and come down to the other ceiling panel, and I'm inside that room. We especially tell you that when we think about your data centers and about your server rooms, that they should have real walls surrounding it, because otherwise, what's the use of having a door that needs a badge or a key card to get in if I just go over the wall? And, of course, logical control over the transactions, data, programs, and applications. Some of these are, again, examples of what we might be looking at. And it could be just something as simple as writing it down on paper, who went in, who went out. I worked at one place, over in Hawaii, which is why I went there, because it was in Hawaii. I thought, well, that's a great contract, other than I never got to work. But anyway, the server room was a clipboard hanging on the wall. And you picked up the clipboard and you signed in on the honor system and then went into the unlocked door. And I was like, okay, I guess they are having some control. Maybe not the best, but they had it. Anyway, so that's what we're looking at, right, is what are the types of ways in which we are working with physical access. Now, the IT assets that are being secured can be grouped into 4 logical layers. Those layers would be the networks, the platforms, the databases, and applications. So obviously the networks would be about the infrastructure, the routing, switching, and how they're connected together. The platforms would be your operating systems and the type of servers that they're running on. Unix systems, mainframes, Windows operating systems. Databases, I think, are pretty straightforward. Applications, of course. What's running? You have some programs that are very important. If I was running an airline, I'm going to think the application that handled ticketing and booking, probably pretty important to the way in which my company runs. So, again, these are all things that we want to look at. We group the assets, and we have these 4 logical layers. Now, the information owner or the manager should be the one that determines who is allowed to have access. And usually, hopefully, at least you'll find out as you audit, whether or not this request for access is done in a written authorization. Logical access can be implemented by security administration, by basically determining which user or groups of users are going to be allowed to have authorization. And reviews of the access authorization should be evaluated regularly. Again, I tell the story about this person I worked with in the Midwest who said he was part of an audit team to a bank and found that when they logged in with a mail clerk's level of authorization, that they were able to write a large letter of credit, like $2 million letter of credit. And that's telling you that sometimes we have what's called permissions creep. Permissions creep is this thing that happens when we start with the perfectly designed security controls, and then down the road, we don't follow change control very well. Here's an example. Let's say there's a user group that has permissions to use a printer. I suddenly need to have access to that printer. And I call and say, look, I need to get this printed out. I was told to use this printer. So instead of going through change control, somebody just says, okay, I'll just store you in that group. So they put me in that user group. Now I can use that printer. Okay, but that user group could have been assigned permissions to other locations. And without having that type of analysis to look at what's the ripple effect if I move you there, then we start seeing this permissions creep. That's an example anyway. More than likely, that's what happened at that bank. But I don't know that for sure because I wasn't working on that job. Now, when we think about access control, there actually is a number of different models, but the two we're going to talk about are the mandatory access controls and the discretionary access controls. Now, your mandatory access controls, they're logical control filters that validate access credentials that can be modified by a normal user. Now, one of the things about a Mac is that it's prohibitive, in that if anything is not expressly permitted, it's going to be forbidden. Now, I don't think that's a fair way to really categorize mandatory access control. Mandatory means, right, there is access control. And this is where you see mandatory access control most often are in military type of systems. And that is, if I have documents, assets that are labeled top secret, then when I validate your access credentials had better say top secret. But it's more than that, because that doesn't mean I get to see all top secret things. From that ranking, we still have categories of where this information fits into, the slots. And so when they validate my credentials, not only do I have to have top secret, but I have to have it in that category as well. And it's not, and that's it. It's just that simple. Now, if I create a document, because of my access level, everything I create is going to be top secret. In fact, there's an entire set of rules that we have that work with mandatory access control about whether or not I'm allowed to take a document and save it to a lower level or not. Usually not. But it just kind of depends on how it's implemented. Now, the discretionary access control is something I hope you're all familiar with. It's Windows. There, the protection can be modified by the data owner at their discretion. So what does that mean? And this is true, by the way. Anything I create in Microsoft Windows, if I do it with my user account, my user is the owner. Now, once I'm the owner, I can then choose who gets to have access, including, if I want to block or deny the administrator. So now here comes the administrator. They try to open up my folder and it says, bam, permission denied. And they're like, wait, I'm the administrator. That's right, can't get in because you're not the owner. Now in Windows, to make sure that they're actually following the way in which discretionary access control works, all administrators in Windows can go into the properties of an object and take ownership. That means once they are the owner, then they can change the permissions. But that's the only way they can do it. So let's take a look at the privacy management issue and the role of the IS auditor. First of all, privacy is a matter of trust and obligation in relation to the information relating to an individual. Privacy should be built into the policies, standards, and procedures from the very beginning. The privacy impact analysis and other assessments should have the auditor called in to be able to support or review. Such an assessment should do things like determine the nature of personally identifiable information as is associated with the business, document the collection, use, and disclosure, as well as the destruction of personal identification information, and to make sure there is some accountability for privacy issues. As an auditor, you might be asked to give an assurance to the responsibilities or the responsible managers in regards to their adherence to the privacy laws. To do so, the auditor should identify and understand all the legal requirements. Right? Can't form an opinion until we get that much. Check that the sensitive data is being correctly managed. Verify that the correct security measures are being adopted. They should review management's privacy policy to make sure that they took into considerations the requirements of all of the applicable privacy laws and regulations.